นะคะก็ขอต้อนรับนะคะทุกท่านที่กำลังทยอยเข้ามาในห้องประชุม MS Team นี้นะคะเพื่อเตรียมเข้าสู่การฝึกในช่วง 10 นาฬิกานะคะณตอนนี้เมื่อตอนเวลา 9:50 นาทีเราเพิ่งเปิดห้องประชุมเพื่อที่จะให้ผู้เข้าร่วมนะคะทยอยกันเข้ามานะคะก็เริ่มมีผู้ที่ลงทะเบียนมาแล้วก็จะเข้าร่วมการสัมมนาวันนี้นะคะการทำ exercise ของเราวันนี้เนี่ยเริ่มทยอยกันเข้ามาแล้วนะคะที่ปรากฏอยู่บนหน้าจอตอนนี้นะคะก็จะเป็นตารางกิจกรรมที่จะเกิดขึ้นนะคะก็ในช่วงเวลา 10 นาฬิกาเราจะเริ่มการบรรยายนะคะจะเป็น workshop session นะคะซึ่งในขณะที่มีการบรรยายอยู่นั้นนะคะท่านใดที่มีคำถามก็สามารถที่จะพิมพ์คำถามเข้ามาทิ้งไว้ในแชทบ็อกซ์ได้นะคะจะมีน้องที่เป็นแอดมินที่คอยสื่อสารอยู่กับวิทยากรแล้วก็จะคอยตอบคำถามให้นะคะแต่ถ้าสำหรับคำถามใดนะคะที่เข้ามาในช่วงท้ายค่ะหลังจากที่เราจบการบรรยายในช่วง 10 นาฬิกาแล้วนะคะเวลาประมาณ 11:45 นาทีค่ะก็จะเป็นช่วง Q&A อีกรอบหนึ่งนะคะซึ่งก็จะเป็นการเปิดให้ผู้เข้าร่วมเนี่ยสามารถถามคำถามได้อีกเช่นกันค่ะก่อนที่เราจะปิดการเวิร์กช็อปในช่วงเช้าของวันนี้นะคะในเวลา 11:55 นาทีค่ะค่ะอีกสักครู่หนึ่งนะคะเราจะเริ่มกันแล้วนะคะค่ะนอกจากนี้นะคะบนหน้าจอที่ท่านเห็นนะคะก็ยังมี QR code ที่ท่านสามารถสแกนไปนะคะเพื่อดาวน์โหลดเอกสารประกอบการอบรมนะคะรวมทั้ง QR code ที่เมื่อสแกนเข้าไปแล้วเนี่ยท่านก็จะสามารถจอยเข้าร่วมกลุ่มแชทนะคะเพื่อรับทราบข่าวสารนะคะแล้วก็อัปเดตเกี่ยวกับการฝึกต่างๆค่ะ
โทษครับบนหน้าจอ
ค่ะมีท่านใดที่เมื่อกี้มีท่านใดพยายามจะสื่อสารกับทางทีมงานหรือเปล่าคะ
รบกวนโชว์สกรีนด้วยค่ะยังไม่เห็นเลยค่ะ
อ๋อยังไม่เห็นเหรอคะเดี๋ยวสักครู่นะคะ
ค่ะ
ทีมงานกำลังแก้ไขนะคะขออภัยในความไม่สะดวกค่ะ
ยังไม่มีเอกสารประกอบการอบรมด้วยค่ะ
ค่ะยังไม่มีเอกสารประกอบการอบรมนะคะเดี๋ยวรอสักครู่นะคะเดี๋ยวจะให้ทางแอดมินขึ้นอีกครั้งหนึ่งค่ะ
ค่ะเบื้องต้นนะคะเอกสารประกอบการอบรมนะคะทางแอดมินกำลังดำเนินการอยู่ค่ะแต่ว่านี้เป็นโฟลเดอร์ของเอกสารประกอบการประชุมค่ะหากมีแล้วค่ะทางแอดมินจะดาวน์โหลดอยู่ในโฟลเดอร์ดังกล่าวค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
โอเคค่ะในขณะนี้นะคะเราได้นำกำหนดการและ QR code ขึ้นจออีกครั้งหนึ่งแล้วนะคะค่ะไม่ทราบว่าผู้ที่เข้าร่วมเวิร์กช็อปในวันนี้เห็นกันเรียบร้อยไหมคะนะคะก็ที่ปรากฏบนจอก็จะเป็นกำหนดการนะคะรวมทั้ง QR code นะคะสำหรับการดาวน์โหลดเอกสารนะคะแล้วก็สำหรับการจอยกรุ๊ปไลน์ค่ะค่ะในอีกสักครู่หนึ่งนะคะเราจะเริ่มการเปิดการอบรมในวันนี้นะคะอีกอึดใจเดียวค่ะ
บัดนี้นะคะได้เวลาอันสมควรสำหรับกิจกรรมค่ะดิฉันนางสาวหานินีนพพงษ์นัทยาและคุณสิริขวัญฉายดิโลกขออนุญาตทำหน้าที่เป็นผู้ดำเนินรายการในหัวข้อการอบรม Incident Response Foundation วันนี้ค่ะขอเรียนเชิญท่านกวินบุญยปรีดีท่านวิทยากรการอบรมในวันนี้ค่ะ
ฮัลโหลครับได้ยินไหมครับ
ได้ยินค่ะสวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับทุกท่านที่รวมงานวันนี้ครับผมชื่อกวินบุญยปรีดีผมจะเป็นพรีเซนเตอร์วันนี้ในเรื่อง Incident Response Fundamentals นะครับเดี๋ยวผมเปลี่ยนเป็นภาษาอังกฤษเพราะว่าpresentation มันอยู่ในภาษาอังกฤษนะครับแต่ว่าถ้ามีคำถามก็ส่งในแชทเลยครับโอเคครับเดี๋ยว share screen หน่อยนะครับโอเคครับเห็นไหมครับ
เห็นค่ะ
Okay,ครับ. So let me begin. Thank you everyone for attending today's session. My name is Kewin Bunyapridi or Kewin Bunyapridi. I'm Thai, but I'm born and raised in the U.S. That's why my samniang mun kon phalang kap. So I have been contracted to talk to you today about incident response fundamentals by Retrospect Labs in coordination with the NCSA, National Cybersecurity Agency. So thank you for hosting. So a little background about me. I have been in cybersecurity, IT, business and management for now over 20 years, 20 ปี My experience spans from the US, North America, as well as Asia. So right now I'm based in Singapore, but I'm currently in Muang Thai. So my experience is also ranging from small startup organizations, ประมาณ 30 คน all the way up to large class corporations, ประมาณ 400,000 คน So I've been seeing all different spectrums of different environments. And also my clients, my ลูกค้า they also range from financial services and a lot of critical infrastructure such as energy, manufacturing, you name it. In terms of my education and certifications, I have a Parinya 3 จาก UPenn from economics. Yes, I do have an economics degree, but I have always loved computers. I've built computers since I was a teenager, so I love to work with computers. And then after that, I got into cybersecurity IT shortly after that in 1999 and never looked back. After that, I got my Binyato T NYU, New York University. So I did my master's degree there. It's a combination of IT, cybersecurity, and business. And finally, I went to do my Binya Ek in Singapore. I haven't completed yet. I still need to finish my dissertation, so you can't call me Mo yet. But hopefully my Paul man is going to be proud one day when I finish that and call me Mo Gowin. In terms of my certifications, professional certifications, you can see it's across the board. Lots of vendors like Cisco, Checkpoint, Microsoft, and more specific certifications across the board, maybe CISSP, cloud security, association with the CCSK, even Azaka C-Risk for, a certified risk management. So it shows you my breadth and depth of experience in cybersecurity. Please do feel free to chat in the box for any questions during this presentation. So let's get started. Let's talk about what is this training course about? What are you here for the next hour and a half for? So this is a primer course where you'll learn some important aspects of incident response or IR. So I will help introduce some methodologies, approaches, frameworks, and tools used in IR and help you guidance on some secure case management platforms as well. And help share some scenarios as well, case studies and all that we've seen in the news and I've seen in my experience. The ultimate goal for today is to build the awareness in effective incident response, not just incident response, but effective, and to help you drive proper processes, tools, and procedures using these best practices. So let's start with foundations. I want to talk about what's in the news. มีอะไรในข่าวทุกวันนี้ So we see that organizations, we need to bolster the online defenses. There's more cyber attacksที่ขึ้นมาทุกวันในข่าว right? both public and private sectors, data leaks, ransomware, breaches. Even the NCSA has said that at least 200 pieces of critical information infrastructure across 7 sectors need to adopt minimum necessary measures to guard against these different attacks. In Muang Thai alone, there's been high-profile cyber attacks that have been reported. And if you look it up, some of the hospitals like Sarapuri, they were hit by a ransomware attack last year. 13 million customers from e-commerce platforms in November of 2020, and even cyber attacks on Bangkok Airways and AXA Insurance. An even recent case, that involved the Public Health Ministry, in which a user, claimed to have 16 million hacked records. So you can kind of see a lot of these things have been coming up and coming up more and more. So it's not going away. It's going to be more and more. My old จ้านายเก่า, Ajahn Prinya Homanek, he even said, as he's a board member at the National Cybersecurity Committee, and he even said that there's this thing called the triple extortion that's carried out by attackers against victims today. What does that mean? Triple extortion. The first basically starts with hackers placing restrictions on data access by encrypting the files. That's what happens in ransomware. And they ask for ransomware payment for a key to unlock it. And if you as a victim have backup data and refuse to pay, the attackers or hackers, they may threaten in the second step to release the sensitive information. So you imagine if you're in the hospitals, right, and they succeed to encrypt your patient data. That's really bad because patient data, PII data, personally identifiable information, that goes against some regulatory laws, and you may be fined on that. And then releasing that will cause some really bad implications on financial penalties. So that if you refuse to pay, again, the attackers will use this data and then try to use some social engineering attacks, maybe swindling people out of their money, reaching out to these victims with the leaked data directly and say, hey, we have data on you and your health and your sensitive data. If you do not pay up, we'll release it. So this is called triple extortion. So even our own NCSA Deputy Secretary General, Kun Amon Chomchoi, he told them that this agency, they were part of a breach investigation at one of the hospitals at Phetchabun. And that it basically what happened was there were data that was stolen, 16 million records of data. And so due to this, I think that's why we're here today. It's an increasing concern. I'm really concerned about it. It happens in the US, but a lot more times in Thailand. So for me, Ben Kon Thai, and I want to make sure that, Thailand, succeeds and learn and then helps protect against these cyber attacks as a country. So let's move on. Let's ask, what is incident response? Everyone may be asking, what are we learning about today? And then incident response, by definition, basically says it's an organized approach to managing a cyber security incident. And I stress in bold, organized, because I have seen in my 20 years disorganized or unorganized, no organization at all. It's something that happened. So in one of my old bodhisattvas, we had a virus attack. And this attack basically started infecting systems, high-profile systems. And this was a financial firm, so it's a critical infrastructure. Financial firm serving global clients. And this malware started spreading. Even though we had world-class SOC, we had world-class threat intelligence and everything, it started spreading. So we just built the SOC, so things were starting just to come up from an operational standpoint. And what happened was everyone was panicking. ทุกคนถามว่า like, what's happening นู่นนี้ and even the CISO basically was asking what's happening. Even the CIO was asking what's happening, CTO. So it was a mess. Everyone was asking who's doing what and everything. So the whole process of responding to this malware attack was very disorganized, and it was very so even my team, we managed to get it together, isolate the systems that were infected, clean them out, make sure everything was okay, and then spinning back up. But one of the important things is the lessons learned. So having an organized approach is key, very important, because without that, if your incident response is not organized, then you'll get into maybe even a worse state than you are today. And basically, having organized means having this high degree of readiness. You're ready to manage a different variety of different incident types. Like here, as I say, ransomware of number one, business email compromise, or BEC. Phishing attacks you know about, data breaches, denial of service, meaning someone attacking your network and then your service, maybe e-commerce, is down. So if you go to maybe say Shopee or Lazada and someone DDoS attacked them and their service is not available, they'll go down. So that's really bad impact to their revenue and bottom line, and even network compromise. So all these different types of incidences have different ways to address them. So the more you are prepared, the greater your capability in detection and analysis of these issues. So you also have to stay ready to involve, performing lessons learned activities and taking those findings to continue improving on that. And I like to share, what does incident response, what does it look like? So the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, or Nist, have compiled this kind of life cycle, and to show you what the 4 phases of the Nist incident response cycle looks like. So you can see from the very top, it's preparation. Next is detection and analysis. After that is containment and eradication and recovery. And after that is post-incident activity. So let's talk about these more in depth, just really quickly. So the first step is preparation. When you begin the process to secure your network, first we prepare for attacks, which take place right? Anytime. It could take place now, it could take place tomorrow, the next hour, the next minute. So we need to be prepared for something that may happen. You may never know when these attackers gain access to company data, unless you're prepared for the attack. So not only you need to plan for this strategy, but you should have immediate access to the basic information, like who to contact, where to go, where to start investigation. So this information is really useful to accelerate the communication process to make the response more efficient. And one of the more important components to prepare is backup and disaster recovery, or DR. I know everyone in critical infrastructure, normally you have a business continuity, disaster recovery, BCDR, maybe like a server. And it's important to have this DR server so you can continue to serve the business operations, right? I imagine like one of my clients, my lukha, is energy. And imagine if energy, one of their servers get hacked, they get hit by ransomware, and they go down. What happens to their clients, their customers that they serve? How many people are they serving in terms of an energy grid? Even in like Containment, right? If one of the energy grids go down, how big of a section, are people going to be loss of power? And that can really have a bad effect, not only on the company, but the people's lives. So really important to have this DR server and continue to serve the business. Daily backups as well. So having this preparation in phase 1, really important to be prepared. In phase 2, is called detection and analysis. So you have proper detection and analysis, which is required for organizations to be prepared to respond to any incident, but should focus on preparing for incidences that use common attacks. So different types of incidences, like we said, ransomware, BEC, phishing, and all that stuff, you should always be aware of potential attacks and the attack vectors that they come in. And you look for signs or symptoms of an attack. Maybe all of a sudden an IP address you see on your event logs, right? You're seeing this thing gradually hit your firewalls, or gradually hit your switches, your proxies, everything, or maybe even your traffic. Right now, your traffic, maybe your network traffic is slowing down, or your bandwidth, is going down, or even you're having pop-ups. And so basically, these are called indicators of compromise, or indicators from security logs. Or web server logs, real-time network sniffing, event viewers, you name it, anything to assist in this investigation. So detection of this. So once you're equipped with this data, you can perform further analysis of the security incident. Incident detection analysis would be easy if every indicator were guaranteed to be accurate. But unfortunately, it's not always the case. There's always false positives, things maybe events coming in that are alerted that are not true. There are always false positives and misconfigurations. It will affect analysis process. So in this case, you need maybe more time for your teams to do analysis and investigating the problem. So always maintain, best practices to maximize the accuracy of the indicators as well as the availability of your logs. And that's in phase 2. Moving on to phase 3. We're looking at containment, eradication, and recovery. So in this phase of the plan, once a security event is verified, you have to analyze, right, the symptoms and plan a strategy to recover and correct. So first is containment, right? Say that you have a worm or virus, in my example, that was starting to spread. You need to gather evidence from all your audit logs, maybe email messages, maybe the files that have been detected from your antivirus that's executable, right? That's infecting the system. So this evidence, together with the time, date, location, you need to properly investigate using these chain of events. It's like in, I don't know if you watch CSI, criminal investigations, right? Maybe a murder. Something happened, someone got killed in a building. You have to timestamp the time of death. You have to timestamp the weapon of use. You have to collect that. You have to keep it for evidence, right? And you need to uncover this to build a chain of events to understand from the attacker what they did and what happened and how it's going and what chungwo or vulnerability was in your network to make this happen. So if the organizations do not know, these things and take no action, they will continue to remain forever and ever and ever, right? Until, attackers exploit them again. They lose money and they lose uptime. They lose, brand reputation. Okay, next after that is eradicate. So once you isolate, you find like maybe a virus spreading, you need to isolate the machine, right? You can kill off the port. You can sometimes turn off the machine. We'll get that into more details about that later. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's not. To kill off the malware, maybe you disable a user account, maybe you remove the web shell. So many things you could do, right? And then finally, you need to recover, right? Once the system, it's especially a critical system, right? If it's a critical server running, financial computations or financial analysis for your services or your clients, you need to recover that as quick as possible, right? Actually have the backup to run it and then restore the system to a healthy state. And you need to confirm that the recovery is fully functional, right? And there's no malware that's still left behind. The last one is the post-incident activity. So stage 4 on the left. And this was actually one of the most important parts of incident response process. But a lot of companies that I've been in, that I have consulted with, they tend not to pay attention or focus on it. And the problem here is that, it's all about lessons learned. From an organization's perspective, after an attack, an encryption, when the IT administrator has discovered the incident, reformat the server, bring them back online, recover the business operation, that's in. Case closed, right? No, that's not right. You need to understand what happened, how it happened, and how you can prevent it, from happening again in the future. So you have to ask the teams, if you're on the ground team right now, if you're an IT team, if you're in security, you have to become Tom, Lion. You have to say, did this IT team and management perform the right steps, right? Is there anything missing? Did we miss a step? Was there a proper and timely communication? You know, if an incident occurred and people are asking every second, every minute, you know, was there proper communication maybe to the CISO or the CEO or even legal team, right? If something, an insider hacked your network and you need to take legal action, right? Even as a public company, right? You're a public utilities company, a hospital, you know, and confidential data leak. In the US, for example, you need to report it by law now. By now, like 72 ชั่วโมง, you need to report it or disclose, or else you'll get fined. So you need to communicate maybe with your external communications team, your media team. Were there any steps that were taken that could potentially speed up the recovery process? So maybe you did a whole scenario, you did incident response, everything's okay, but it took maybe, you know, longer than usual. Maybe it took a week, and it maybe could have taken 3 days, right? And finally, maybe another question is, what corrective actions could be taken to further improve the investigation, analysis, and recovery? So maybe the tool that you're using, maybe it's not good enough. Maybe you need a better tool, a better open source tool or a better commercial tool you can use to speed up the process, gather evidence in a better way. So just to sum up, IR is in these 4 phases. Really important to understand each and every phase. So bottom line, this process can help an organization to improve the efficiency, effectiveness, everything, and can strengthen your security controls. And finally, just to say that all this life cycle, these stages are very interdependent and always changing. What I mean is, you know, something may occur. You may finish the incident response, you finish, you patch, you release, you do lessons learned, but then something happens again. So you always have to be prepared, right? In security, I think I found the right job because for me, ผม like ทำงานและเบื่อง่ายครับ. So something like this in cybersecurity, I'm always looking. I wake up every day, ตื่นแต่เช้า, and then I do my morning walk, and then I read the news on Twitter or LinkedIn, or in my hidden Facebook account just to read what's going on in the cybersecurity world. Because threats are always changing. Things are always moving. So you always have to be on top of this. And I recommend ทุกท่านที่ like Unite Cybersecurity to look at also some of these news feeds and subscribe to them. Maybe Nist, maybe ISO has some good feeds, some very good local feeds. Maybe the NCSA will have their feeds as well. You can subscribe to them, and all that from the local standpoint as well. I'm going to take a pause here. I don't know in the chat มีคำถามไหมครับ
Right now, no questions in the chat box.
Okay.
But if you have any questions นะคะ all the participants, you can type your questions in the chat box นะคะ ถ้าเกิดว่าผู้ที่รับฟังอยู่ในขณะนี้นะคะ ท่านใดที่มีคำถามสามารถพิมพ์เข้ามาได้เลยนะคะ เดี๋ยวจะมีแอดมินคอยมอนิเตอร์แล้วเดี๋ยวจะคอยสื่อสารกับวิทยากรอย่างนี้ค่ะ ขอบคุณค่ะ
ขอบคุณครับ แปลในพิมพ์ในภาษาไทยได้และคุณจะช่วยแปลได้ครับ
Of course ค่ะ
Okay, great. So let's move on. In incident response, what are we talking about? What is the main outcome? What are we trying to achieve? You know, as cybersecurity, we work for the business, right? We work to maintain and understand what is the impact to a cybersecurity incident. What happens? You know, and it's our job, our nati, to help minimize the impact. So incident response or IR, the whole outcome is to minimize the impact for your organization, your bodhisat. And when I talk about impact, it's not just the operations, it's not just the server or the service that's down, but everything else. We're talking about the integrity of your information, meaning like if once you recover from maybe an incident and then you bring it back up to normal, are you 100% sure, nanon, that your system is clean, that the hacker doesn't have a backdoor, that your data is actually secure? So that's an impact. Another thing is about your company's reputation. If you're in e-commerce, right? Let's just take example Shopee, Lazada. Very competing organizations in e-commerce in Muay Thai. And they're always competing all that stuff. And what if you're using both, right? Shopee and Lazada, shop here or shop there, fine. Whatever, find the cheaper price. But what happens if you find out Shopee don't hack, right? What is your confidence level to continue shopping on Shopee? Would you rather shift to Lazada? Yeah, so that's something to consider. If you're an energy company or if you're a manufacturing company, you're manufacturing Kong, like maybe, manufacturing parts for cars or something and stuff, really dependent upon, the big companies like Toyota, Honda, and all that, and you don't hack, and then they take your trade secrets. Do you think Toyota, Honda, Mitsubishi, they might still do, business with you? They may do less business. They may just shut it off and do something else against you and with your competition. So reputation is a really big impact. The next thing is psychological, right? So one of the examples I like to share, it's very public news, right? So ประมาณ 5-6 ปีที่แล้ว there's this one website ชื่อ Ashley Madison. So I'm not sure if you read about it, what this website is about, but Ashley Madison actually is a website for married men, คนที่ like ผู้ชายที่แต่งงานแล้ว to meet their mistresses. And this one was hacked, and the hackers stole the user data and exposed it. So imagine the psychological impact on that. What happened was, people were fired from their jobs when they found out. The jobs found out. The companies found out. People were divorced. มีคนหย่าด้วย and even some people like Kato Tai, due to this impact. So imagine the psychological horror that happened in this hack. So this huge implications. And lastly, safety. And let's talk about human physical safety. So I gave you an example of, power grids that can be hacked. And there has been. In Hahok Bitila in 2015, Ukraine, their power grid got hacked, and then their whole operations got shut down. And so then no power for more than 300,000 kon. So imagine that. Imagine personal safety. Imagine if there are hospitals in this energy grid and there's backups, but for how long? So imagine the power grid went offline and for days, right? Imagine the physical safety of the people. So how do we minimize the impact? I want to share you on this screen. You need to do this, some of these points. Okay, so you need to determine the extent of the incidents. What host was affected? What data was stolen? How long was a hacker within your network? That's called dwell time. Dwell time หมายความว่า like คนที่อยู่ใน network ที่ hack network andอยู่ในนั้นเลย the average that they say statistically that hackers can be in a network 5-6 เดือน that's the average. People don't know about it. They're in the network 5-6 months. They're going around, they're understanding the network, they pull data, they change things around. Really bad. Next, you have to identify what happened, what vulnerabilities, what chungwo was exploited, right? You need to understand that. How did they come in? How did they get it into the network? Next, you have to identify the tactics, techniques, and procedures. or they call it TTPs. I'm not sure if you heard of TTPs, very important. I'll discuss later in the presentation. Next, you need to determine the status of the actor and adversary, active or not, meaning, like I said, the hacker could still be in the network after you finish your incident response and you patch everything up. Maybe he's still in there. You don't know. He could be active, or he could turn off his access and turn it back on. We don't know. It could be that complex. You need to leverage threat intelligence. Threat intel is very important, especially in operations, right? You need to know what's going on. Like I said, I read the news every day. I read my news feeds, public news. I even have private feeds, commercially paid private feeds for my customers or even my own company to understand what's going on. Maybe you hear about something in the dark web about your organization. You can look at keywords. You can have organizations, threat intelligence services use that for you. You can contract them to say, if there's any word within the dark web that has my company name, show me, alert me. So that way you'll be prepared to understand what's going on. Maybe they found something, maybe they found a chongwo, maybe they found some user accounts they hacked from phishing. So you have to understand and leverage threat intel. You need to communicate effectively and accurately with those that need to know. Now this I'll share later in the slides. Need to know. Sometimes you can't share everything with everyone, right? Only those that need to know need to know. It's from the military, right? Because sometimes if something happened, a hacker could be insider. Insider threats are as dangerous or even more dangerous than external people. เพราะว่า insiders, they have the keys to the kingdom. They know the systems, they know the data, they know where to go. So if you share the information of an incident too much, maybe shared it on a shared drive that's open publicly within the organization, and this insider hacker has access and knows exactly what you're doing to like bokbong or protect or eliminate what he's doing or he or she is doing, then they know what's going on. So communication to those that need to know only. Like I said, you need to support parts of the business, media, HR, what's going on. If something's affected and your shareholder price, your stock gets affected, how will legal team, how will human resources, how will the external corporate communications deal with this incident? You need to work with them. Really important. It's not just a technical thing. It's also understanding and putting it into an effective communication plan. Lastly, remediating effectively. And I'll talk about this later. Doing things that matter and avoiding mistakes. You can remediate, but if it's not effective, it might even make the situation a lot worse, right? So, and other things is not even remediating because you don't even know what's happening. So, if ineffective and no remediation is something to avoid. I'll take a pause here. Any คำถามไหมครับ?
Okay,ค่ะ, คุณกวิน there are actually two questions in the chat box.
Okay.
So the first one from Kun Virayut, he asked, are there any recommendations to handle the triple extortion?
Okay. That's a very good question, right? Because it's not an exact science. Incident response. There's an art to it. There's a way to handle situations, but it really matters. I think at the end of the day, you have to work with this business to understand the risk of each option. So say, for example, let's go back to that, saying that, okay, so someone has infected your systems with ransomware and encrypted it, right? And say, okay, you pay me or else I release the data. So understand what data was encrypted. Was it sensitive information? Was it information that was just about your username and passwords? Was it information about clients, right? So if your business says the risk is too high to release, and you're willing to pay, the cost of paying is lower than the cost of the financial penalties, the sensitive data being released, some people do pay it. My recommendation, and a lot of cybersecurity companies say, do not pay, right? Do not pay. I can't, there's no solid answer, yes or no, I would say. You have to gauge the risk. What is the risk of the information that was encrypted? If you're willing to take the risk and say, I don't see that the information you encrypted is important enough, or the operations, I already have a backup, I can restart everything, recover everything, fine, don't pay, ignore them. So that can happen too. That it's very situational. Different incident types have different tactics, and I'll share that later. Actually, there's a way to really look at it from a systematic approach.
Thank you so much. So just to summarize in Thai นะคะก็สำหรับคำตอบในข้อนี้เนาะอย่างที่คุณกวินบอกก็คือไม่มีคำตอบที่ตายตัวนะคะขึ้นอยู่กับสถานการณ์มากกว่าแล้วเดี๋ยวเราจะไปคุยกันต่อในสไลด์ต่อๆไปนะคะ Okay, there is another question. Okay, from คุณชัยนรงค์ In case 0 day happens in a company, do you have some guidelines to manage about that incident and how to respond?
Good question. 0 days, I would say, a very priority, right? Because 0 days by definition is something that you can't protect against. There's no patch, there's no workaround. Oh, well, there could be a workaround, but there's no immediate patch to the 0 day, right? So I would take it as you need to build a playbook, which I'll discuss again in the later slides. What a playbook is on perhaps specific incidents like a 0 day, what happens. And depends on the 0 day itself, right? If it's a 0 day virus and it affects your systems, there's a playbook for that. You say it affects the system, there's no patch, there's no workaround. What do you do in your workflow? You have to maybe work with other organizations, maybe partners, or your own vendor if a system has a 0 day, right? To work on a workaround or a stopgap measure. What could you do to isolate the system, to segment it, but while operating still as business continuity continues, right? So lots of situations depending upon the 0 day.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Also, you will give more information about the playbook later.
Yes.
Of course. Okay นะคะก็สำหรับเมื่อกี้นะคะก็เดี๋ยวคุณกวินก็จะให้ข้อมูลเพิ่มเติมเดี๋ยวมีอยู่ในการบรรยายในวันนี้เช่นกันนะคะ Okay, so those are the two questions that we have for now.
Okay, ขอบคุณมากครับ. So just to summarize this, the main outcome again is to minimize the impact. So I'm showing you this small chart on the bottom right. If you minimize impact and damage to your organization, you do protect your bottom line, your revenue, right? And that also protects your reputation and your trust. It helps strengthen your security after lessons learned, and it continues to ensure business continuity. So it's a very cyclical fashion, right? So it has a very trickle effect, I would say a butterfly effect. So everything you do, incident response, has an impact upon everything: revenue, reputation, trust, your own controls. Okay, so there are common mistakes I've seen and a lot of companies make during an investigation, during incident response, and actually can make the whole process worse. Maybe your system is you're not doing a best practice, so you're losing data, or you act too quickly without understanding the situation, right? So let's take, for example, you found a system that's infected, right, by a virus. And it's just one system for now, right? What's the first thing you would do? What's the easiest thing you would do, right? Take it offline, reboot it. But you have to consider some things, right? What if the data to understand the actor or the attacker, how they got in, how they infected the system, is within the random access memory, the RAM, right? This random access memory is basically volatile memory that basically happens once you're running the computer system. So what happens if this malware went through this random access memory and then you decided to reboot, right? Then you lose it. Then you lose all the evidence. And it's going to be a lot harder to investigate and find out how did it happen. So if you act too quickly, yeah, you could lose like critical information or evidence. I've also seen companies that do bad operational security. I'll share that in the next slide, what operational security is, Opsec. There's also, like I said before, ineffective remediation, right? Once you investigate, you contain, you try to eradicate, and you try to remediate the situation. There's good remediation, there's bad remediation, there's even no remediation. And like I said, even no follow-up after the fact. No lessons learned, no understanding, improving your playbook or situation. So a lot of common missteps happen. Personally, for me, I want to share what are the biggest mistakes to avoid when you're doing incident response, because incident response IR is a critical component to contain, remediate security incidents and events. It can be also incredibly detailed and difficult process. It's not easy. It's not easy to manage when you're trying to quickly restore, when you're having your boss, your John and I, asking what's happening every minute. If your business is down, in the business itself, it's like, what's going on? My website's not up. People can't shop. We're losing, hundreds of thousands of baht per minute just because you're not up. So the biggest mistakes I want to share that I've seen in my experience is, number one, no playbook, no IR playbook. And I'll define playbook later in this presentation. But basically, it's incident response. Like I said, it should be a well-planned process for the security team. And not every process is the same across organizations. There may be a framework, right? Certain workflows, steps, playbooks to follow, but you can't just copy and paste to another organization because it's customized to your organization. What ticketing system you used, how you track it, what teams you need to contact. Some of those okay, some of those very different. So escalation processes as well. You're sending email alerts, you're doing different calls to maybe your war room. So everything is very unique. So you need to have good playbooks. And I've seen companies maybe have operations up, they don't have a playbook, they don't know what's going on. So they panic. The second mistake I've seen people and companies do is not enough logs, none of logging. So logs are really important. Like I said, you need to build a trail of what happens, during the incident, what happened before, what's happening after, right? You build this basically a story, I guess, a storyboard, and understanding what's happening, very timely, the dates, times, locations of what happened. So you can understand, like, logging is really important. And I know some organizations, some critical infrastructures do require, TGCAP log, maybe 3-4 เดือน just for compliance. But that may not be enough. Like I said, an attacker I've seen has been in an organization for 6 เดือน. So imagine only have 3 logs for 3 เดือน. Then, you can't build that full picture of what happened. Some organizations I've seen, due to some compliance mandates, you know how long they keep logs? 7 ปี. 7 years of logs. That's a lot. It's costly, but there's good ways to do it. I think there's a lot of vendors or services that can provide that. You can push the logs out. You can compress it, put a flat file, encrypt it, compress it. You can save some ways to do that. So some compliance mandates say 7 years. So having enough logs to do incident response, that's another mistake I've seen. Another thing is doing, reacting to real world security incidences. So only reacting to real world instances. So tabletop exercises is samkhan mak. It's like doing a fire drill, right? every bodhisattva is required to do fire drills every year, right? If you're in the office, maybe not now, it's work from home or you're working remote, but when you're in the office, right, it's required to do by building code and spec and by law to do yearly annual fire drills. Why is that? Because you need to understand what to do in the situation, where to go, how to do it, what's the time. And reacting to real world scenarios like this is good, but there's also tabletops that you can do to practice and work through with other people. So I don't see organizations doing tabletop exercises enough. And there are some companies on bodhisattvas that do help exercise on doing tabletops as well to understand what happens in an incident, who to contact, where to go, what to do. So these are some of the biggest mistakes I would like you to understand and to avoid and think about. Okay, any questions? มีคำถามไหมครับ
Okay. No questions right now ค่ะคุณ Gawin.
Thank you
But
very
I would like to encourage all the participants, if you have any questions สามารถพิมพ์เป็นภาษาไทยได้นะคะเดี๋ยวพิธีกรจะช่วยแปลให้วิทยากรตอบคำถามอีกครั้งหนึ่งค่ะ
ครับขอบคุณครับ So I referenced operational security, Opsec, but they name it. So what is Opsec? Opsec is basically understanding and enforcing procedures and policies to protect sensitive information from falling into the hands of the adversary. That means it's to keep your secrets safe, that are very priceless to your organization. So this term, operational security, OPSEC, just as a background, it was first coined by the US military during the Vietnam War. And it was basically as a result of an effort led by a team called Purple Dragon. So they noticed that their enemies, the US enemy, America's enemies, basically seemed to be able to anticipate what they were doing next. It was said that like North Vietnam, Viet Cong didn't manage to decrypt the US communications, but they were understanding the US military tactics. They were able to look and understand what they did. And I think it's because some of the information being shared was being shared too openly. So this information got leaked out somehow. And the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese were able to anticipate what they were doing. So over time, this concept has spread from the military to the US government departments and now into private industry and developed in more detail. So by definition, the US government says operational security involves a process to determine unclassified or controlled critical information that may be an indicator or pathway to classified information. So some of the ways that OPSEC, like I said, is bad, that could fail right here, is changes in actor tradecraft, ramping up of executing motivations and actors going dark and resurfacing later on. So let me give you an example. So if here's actually a real life. One of my Luca, my clients, basically faced an incident, and they were actually documenting everything. เขียนลงใน Google Docs, everything that's happening, everything they found out about this hacker, and then some of the steps they were taking. The bad thing was they were writing it in their shared drive that was still accessible to the hacker. The hacker was actually still within the network. So you know what happened? The hacker actually found the doc and took it and used his doc against them because they knew exactly what the company knew about the hacker themselves and what they were doing. So they took the information out. So failures in ops security, in securing your own sensitive data, revealing sensitive information to those that without the need to know.
ของคุณพีระเนี่ยพี่ยังติดต่อเขาไม่ได้นะคะถ้า
นะครับ Okay. Can you take my mic up? Okay. No come time. So, like I said, our operational security OPSEC is very important. Keeping the information that needs to know on the people, right? You cannot spread the information too much. So another example, right, I'd like to share in a more recent news. So what happened was, one of the applications, TikTok. That TikTok comes from China. And what happened was in the news, U.S. military folks were using the TikTok app. What they didn't know was that when they tagged themselves, it tagged their geolocation too. And what happened was it tagged where they were in the military bases. So, so they found out where the U.S. military bases were. So now, I think the U.S. military banned this. So, operational security is locking down of information, only sharing information that you need to know. Having bad operational security could have dire consequences to you and your company, and even maybe your safety. So now I've shared, in these slides, what things not to do. So what can you do? What can you start? So start the incident response plan. Start that off. You need to, have a plan. You need to identify the host. You need to increase the storage logs, like I said, secure the access to key personnel. Only need to know, determine the means on how to acquire the data of interest. You need to install something on your endpoint where it's infected, install it and pull the information out. Documentation of everything that has happened and your decision points, and establish protocols. Protocols, I'll explain in the next slide. So protocols is basically the way that you communicate, how you communicate, and with who. So say, for example, again, you get hit by malware. It's infecting your e-commerce system. E-commerce system goes down. You need to know exactly who to talk to first, the key people, the point of contacts. Do you talk to your new boss, your big boss first? Tell him exactly what's going on so he can relay it to the business. Other support teams, how much do they know or need to know? The IT people that need to, isolate the system. How much could they know or would know or should know? They should know something about the situation, but maybe not everything of what was taken, right? They need to just know which systems to lock down. And the rest of the staff, maybe it's very sensitive information that got leaked. Maybe they don't need to know at all. So the rest of the staff that are not involved, maybe the public people, may not need to know what's going on depending upon the risk or the information that was taken. Even ways that you communicate, right? So say if your network is infected, the hacker is still there. You don't know. ไม่รู้ว่าเขาอยู่ตอนนี้หรือไม่อยู่ How you communicate? Do you still use the same communication system on the phone? Do you communicate in your enterprise Slack or your enterprise messaging system? Maybe you shouldn't, because maybe he's in there already sniffing. Like he can see every chat going on. So you need a way to have an out-of-band communication. Have a different phone that's not on that network. That's like a burner phone, a temporary phone, something that's off the grid, off the network completely. A two-way system that's not connected in any way. You have to think about that. What are the protocols in doing that? And also storage of investigation. Where do you put the files of the investigation? Do you keep it on this same network that's infected? Do you put it on to another system? Maybe a warm standby environment that's not completely connected. Maybe you put it there, or you put it off storage in an offline USB. It could be like that. So having these protocols, this is what they call protocols in place, will help prevent being sidetracked and continuously interrupted. Again, people are asking you every minute what's going on. If you have protocols set, you can give them, look, I'll notify you every hour. If the priority is priority 0, e-commerce down, I will notify you every 10 minutes, right? So you need to have this, and it will change over the course, right? So say you remediate something, everything's semi back to normal, then you change the protocols. You say communications now will pull back from every minute or every 10 minutes, now back to an hour, something like that. So those are always ever changing. Also, we talked about organization. Organization, again, is key, right? Having an organized incident response approach. So there's a lot of methodologies out there providing you with methodologies. So some of these are examples of what an incident response or IR plan should include. You have analysis of the threat environment, how you identify the identification of key assets, data, and critical systems infected. The severity ratings and thresholds, like is this a system that's keeping my network alive? Is this system hosting the e-commerce platform? Is this system holding patient data within a hospital? You have to put a rating to that. It's critical, right? Or is a system that's holding nothing? You can do it low. Key responsibilities and roles, of course, very important. Who to reach out to first, who to reach out to next, and so on. The communications plan, how to alert, how to manage the media externally, internally as well. Playbooks, again, for each major incident type, which I'll break down later, and some cool tools and capabilities. So some of these are highlighted in the best practices and how to do it. And sharing this, Nist actually has Computer Security Incident Handling Guide. So you can snapshot this as a special publication 800-61. Okay, I'll speed up a little bit, still have a lot of content. So incident response plan breakdown. So what does the plan look like? So every plan has an overarching IRP, incident response plan, at the highest level. So it's like, every organization, for example, as cybersecurity practitioners, you do have an overarching cybersecurity policy, right? And it may be very general, but it lists maybe here is the mission, the vision, this is why we're doing it, and maybe references to your underlying policies, procedures, guidelines, working instructions, everything underneath. But it's the overarching maybe policy. Same thing with incident response, the plan itself. You have one big plan, Anyaisut, that talks about what you do, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, right? Not too much detail, but under that, each plan will have each incident type and corresponding playbook. So you have maybe an incident type, denial of service. You're getting hit by a DDoS attack, right? Your service is unavailable. What do you do, right? Phishing attacks. You have a phishing email comes in, someone clicks, and you got infected. Don't infect. What do you do, right? What workflows, what playbooks you need to start. And then under each incident type will have different common activities, right? I said every company has their own customized playbook because every corporation is different, right? But they have common activities that can be done. What is your backup retention? How do you communicate? What are the lessons learned? What type of systems you use? How you scan a system is infected by phishing, by a certain virus. These are common activities you have underneath each incident type. And finally, basically under that is the resources. Just simply, you have to have a system ready on who to contact. I got hit by ransomware. How do I kickstart the workflow? How do I kickstart the playbook? But who do I contact first? Here is a list of people I need to contact, right? Common people in certain incidences types, and maybe specific people in certain types. For example, a certain system may have a certain point of contact, the system owner, right? Maybe a different database that got infected. You have to reach out to this specific IT team, right? Maybe if you're a global company. Or maybe it's a different local team in a different database. Then it's a different team. You have to have that all spelled out as the resources to contact. So also, it's also really important where this is stored. because, you know, if something happens, right, and you want to readily click and say, okay, who do I contact first? You need to have a place to store all these different playbooks, right? If it's an online only Google Share or Microsoft SharePoint, that's good, a centralized place. But also look into and consider maybe places that are offline, readily available if you're down, right? If you have no internet connectivity, if your system, your VPN is down and you can't even access the playbook, then you're dead, right? So maybe make sure you have the process to do offline access and syncing, you know, daily because things change, right? Let me do one more. So general approach to investigations. So there are common steps that should be taken in playbooks. And these are basically kind of like the 10 or 11 steps that you commonly do. So you start with creating the case. You capture the findings, the decisions. You identify the impacted hosts, what got infected. You enumerate them to understand the purpose and what is normal for them, meaning you have a baseline of activity, right, going into the database or the server or the system, right? What's normal for them? What is the baseline? And then you identify, you know, the data of interest. What got hacked? Is there sensitive information? Is this database hosting some really proprietary information? Source code on your e-commerce system, patient information, you know, even like, you know, password repositories. Then you take these key artifacts from the acquired data and understand and build this kind of a storyboard. And you build the timeline according to the events, what happened when you'd first detected, some of the techniques that the attackers may have used, some of the indicators meaning you have a baseline, right, of network activity. All of a sudden you get hit, it goes up from 100 megabytes to 1,000 terabytes over the course of 10 minutes. Then you need to kind of understand these indicators. So with these findings, you use threat intel, ACSC, meaning from Retrospect Labs, the Australian Cybersecurity Consortium, or you can utilize National Cybersecurity Agency in Thailand as well, or even some of your critical infrastructure specific special interest groups. Share with them, like find out, is there something that's common that this indicator has been posted on this news line? You know, maybe even your friends that are working in the same industry, maybe competing, you know, frenemies, basically maybe in the same financial institute services, but in a different bank, you know, understanding that. I remember, like, 15 ปีที่แล้ว I worked for a financial services bank, global firm, right? And my เจ้านายใหญ่, he was the SVP of cybersecurity. Something happened. And the first thing he did was pick up the phone and เขาโทรไปหาภรรยาเขา because his wife was working at a competing bank and just said, hey, do you see this? So that stuff like that, depending on the relationship, could be really good to understand, you know, if the financial services is being hit by a certain malware or a certain attacker. So, you know, leveraging threat intel is really important. Also, with the best understanding of the incident, build the remediation plan. Once you have the understanding, you have the data, you need to build what happens next in your workflow, what to do, how to do it, and execute this plan, right? And after that, you monitor the event for anything else. You go and see, you know, once you resolve, you remediate. Once you finish everything, you know, you monitor, see everything's okay, back to normal. Because sometimes maybe the actor has been watching everything, and then maybe a day, a week, a month passes by, and they have a back door you have no idea about, and they do it again. And then, yeah, basically, so you need to really monitor the event. And then once you're confident that the incident is remediated, you perform lessons learned. You talk and debrief with your teams, the people involved. How are we doing? Did we communicate fast enough? Did we isolate the infection good enough? Did we have the right tools in place? So things like that. This is the general approach. So I'll share one more. So incident response plan example. Here's an example from McKinsey. So please snapshot this. This is very good. So this is an IR plan. It's a document that includes about 8 sections. And it's like showing you the procedure guides, playbooks, charters, checklists, how you run an incident response plan. So it kind of takes you through a general high-level step on what to do. So this source is from McKinsey itself. I'll take a pause here. I'll stop for any questions. มีคำถามไหมครับ
โอเคค่ะนะคะเป็นอีกช่วงหนึ่งที่วิทยากรเปิดให้ถามคำถามนะคะ so I will just let you take a little breather before we continue and let the participants ask more questions. Any questions? If you would like to, you can just click raise the hand and then you can just ask the question to the speaker himself. Okay, right now คุณกวินคะ no questions in the chat box.
Okay, ขอบคุณมากครับ
ค่ะ
I'll go ahead and move on. Another thing to consider in incident response as a foundation is how you acquire data acquisition. So not only responding, but responding effectively. You need to have the right data to analyze. Like I said, the logs. How long do you keep it? Where do you keep it? What types of logs do you keep? That's always a challenge I see. People may be logging on their firewalls, but not on their routers and switches. And the firewalls may be completely bypassed. And then they hit the router and switch. So you need that missing log from the routers and switch. Volatile memory. Again, if something's infected and the malware is in the random access memory or RAM or volatile memory, and you like reboot it right away, you lose that data. So you cannot just right away act too quickly. The host itself cannot be turned off, right? You can maybe do other workarounds like isolate it, segment it out, but don't turn it off right away, right? Network traffic. You have a baseline. You understand what's going on. What's not normal, right? What's suspicious. So that thing you need to take into account in the data. And also the disk space, obtaining files of interest. How long does it take to acquire? How big is your disk space itself? Maybe a host that was infected. My host itself on my laptop right now, I have 2 terabytes. That's a lot of data to pull. And if you want to store that, you want to snapshot it, you want to upload it, it takes time. So you have to really find an effective way to acquire the data somehow. Okay, let's move on to playbooks. Playbooks are really important. So, or you do so. There a question?
Oh,ค่ะ. I just want to make sure that the slides is shown and updated. Okay, what I see on the screen is operational security. Is it the slides that we're sharing right now?
Okay, do you see it now?
Hang on a second. Yeah, I can see the same page. The page that says operational security.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, let me reshare. I don't know what happened.
Okay, sure.
I think
no problem,
it didn't update. Okay. Do you see anything new?
Okay, now the playbook slide is here.
Oh, okay, thank you. I don't know
no problem,
what. Maybe it's Mac to my shop, Microsoft. So let me go back. So I think we stopped here. So this incident response plan, snapshot that from McKinsey. And then data acquisition, something I talked about. And now we talk about playbooks. Okay, so playbooks, if you play a sport, right? If you watch soccer or I don't know, I'm American, so I liakwa soccer, but I think it's football, right? If you have football, what do they do? What do great sports teams have in common with incident response teams? Do you need plans, strategies, and playbooks? So you need a way to understand, if your opposite team is doing some certain play, how can you counteract that with a different play? So that's called building a playbook. So they do have portfolios of different types of playbooks. So มันเหมือนที่นี่เลยครับ incident response, you have to have different playbooks. So this is showing you a flowchart of different types of playbooks all together. So if you're looking at, ransomware, phishing, your account got hacked or compromised, your email, or even a host got compromised, leading to data loss in the middle, what happens? Like what type of playbook you need to initiate once this happens. And each playbook will come as a result of the flow chart, what happens. So each playbook basically has the whole incident response lifecycle, triage, collecting information, understanding the attack, first response, investigation, analysis through containment, remediation, review. And each playbook would have a different decision point. So here's a containment IR playbook example, right? So this is, if you see in the playbook itself, or this workflow playbook, something coming in. What happens at this diamond? Each diamond is a decision, yes, no. Where do you go next? Containment actions. What happens in the containment action? Once that's done, additional containment required, yes, then you do it again. So having these flow charts, having these kind of playbook flows are very critical within your own playbooks. And then also, this is an example of a phishing playbook. What happens in each decision tree? What goes on? What's the flow? And one of the key things is to test them. I used to be in a company where, they checkbox because of compliance. They only build incident response because we needed it based on compliance, regulatory compliance from their sector. So they had the playbooks, but they never tested it, right? So you need to test. You need to do tabletop exercises. You need to go in and take a look and understand what's going on and how effective these playbooks are. Because if you don't test a playbook, if a football team doesn't test how they play, you're not going to do it right. Or maybe you identify something that's not working. So you need to test them. So please do test these playbooks once you build them. So I want to share some good playbook tools. So this is a slide that shows you some of the tools that can help you spin up and build and sang a playbook really fast. I'm a fan of this one called flexibleir.com. And you can go to this site and they have incident response playbooks to share and show. If you can see here, the snapshots, the screenshots on the bottom is basically like a Cabana style playbook board that shows you each stage, what you do. And that's just a snapshot. There's a lot of content in there. Where do you go? What do you do in each phase? So please look at this. Even GitHub also has like Cabana style, Kanban style, a view to understand how to build that. So if you use GitHub, use that as well. I use it in my current company at Jira. Okay, some recommended guides from Nist itself. Here's some links to share. I'll share the presentation as well. You don't have to pim by or record it out. Share the slides after. But this shows you some of the ways to handle security incidents, some of the key recommendations from Nist itself, from handling incidences, some flows, some ways to look at it. So I'll share you this after as well. Okay, so let's move on to TTP versus IOC. I shared earlier what TTP is. So TTP, หมายความว่า tactics, techniques, and procedures. And IOC, หมายความว่า indicators of compromise. So both are very important to an investigation. I'll give you an example what an indicator of compromise or indicators are. So an indicator could be, artifacts that is evidence of malicious activity, something like the hacker's IP address, certain different hashes that were detected that aren't, that are malware, domains coming in or detected from out of country, or even different registry keys, indicators showing a change of registry keys itself, or even email addresses from these source attackers. Those are what indicators are. But TTPs are the techniques and tactics and procedures that attackers use utilizing IOCs. For example, if a user has used a registry key to store config data for their malware on a system, the IOC itself is the registry key and that value. But the TTP is how you use that registry key. And in this case, is modifying the registry keys. That's a technique. So you can understand IOCs are great, having that different level, but they can change. Registry keys can change. IP addresses can change. And if you build, an incident response plan to block an IP address, it could be good to some extent, but knowing their technique on entering maybe a network in a Chengwo, the technique to enter into that is even better. If you close that, you blacklist or close that port, their technique to get in is defeated. So that's where I need to really emphasize TTP versus IOC. Why focus on TTPs? It's tough. So one example I can give you a TTP is that attackers only have a different number of ways or different number of techniques to get in. And maybe one sort of technique they can get into scanning a network, right? Finding a 0-day, for example, right? Is using a tool. So they use a specific tool. They built a tool, custom tool with a custom way to detect, the 0-day, right? Now they scan. They use this tool. If you know the technique of using this specific tool, how the tool is used, how it scans, right? And scanning, you can actually use a mitigation strategy to block how this tool is used, right? Maybe they're scanning in a certain port. Maybe they're scanning from a certain IP. The tool itself has ways to scan. If you know how they scan, you can block the tool, right? So maybe the attacker, very complex, has a secondary tool to scan. And you can block that as well. But what happens after that, right? They don't have a third tool. So it takes time. The whole purpose of defeating the attacker is to make it difficult for them, right? And if it's too difficult, then they move on. So for your organization, if you understand incident response and how to understand the TTPs even more better than the IOCs, is very key. So let me share a framework to help to understand incident response, what the TTPs could be. So MITRE, they pronounce it MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, but you pronounce it MITRE. So MITRE has this framework called ATTACK at attack.mitre.org. And it describes known techniques to achieve a given tactic. It also has a list of actor groups that have been known to use a given technique. So this is great. It's a great way to communicate findings. Everyone's speaking the same language. So this is on the bottom is a snapshot of what it may look like. So let me give you more of a complete example. So let's say the adversary, the attacker, the scenario is they identify the adversary authenticating to remote hosts using RDP. An attacker is using RDP, right, to get into your network. So in the attack matrix, you can actually look up under the technique, remote desktop protocol here. You click on this and there's a relevant tactic tag to it called lateral movement. So through this way of identifying easy methodologies, you found out, okay, RDP, you go into the attack MITRE framework and you look that up. You can look at all the different tactics and you can kind of eliminate the ways that they've gotten in. So in this case, lateral movement, T1076, this is something you can easily communicate your findings as well to your threat intel teams, to your other teams that need to maybe close the Chungwall, maybe close the vulnerability. Okay, so it's a great way to do it. Here's another snapshot on some company actually, or some other company mapped how the attack techniques look. And you can see it's only getting bigger and bigger. Because you figure out the different, fixed techniques, the tactics underneath, and the procedures that they have underneath there. So this is awesome. This is a great way to really visualize all the different types of finite techniques, tactics, and procedures. Normally is in kind of this way on the left side in the boxes, and you can kind of click left to right. But this shows like the complete picture. I think I shared a study case, so I'm going to kind of quickly go through this. So here's a real life case study. What happened of a company in financial services that used IOC instead of TTP. So a very large financial services, more than 100,000 people, very good incident response team. They found out that some attacker was like taking data out, doing call moon from an unknown location outside. So they did forensics analysis of the endpoint and revealed the domains and IP addresses used, which is good. So they found out, but they found the IOC. They figured it out, and they were blocking, blacklisting all these IPs. But the IPs, as soon as they were investigating, they found that the IOCs were changed. They were stopped. They disappeared from this machine. So once they started doing something and trying something about it, it changed. It changed the system, which is really really hard for them. And you know what happened over the next 6 months? 6 months, more computers on their network got infected, and data were being pulled. The call moon was being taken out from the same unknown location. They had no idea, and the IOCs were the same, but they were only present, on these machines, and then later vanished again. So imagine how much of a headache that was for this company. Okay, so what happened was this organization ended up working with their vendor. Their incident response team, the vendor, were able to deploy an endpoint agent onto all the endpoints, right, in their environment, 120,000 endpoints. And they had a hunting engine to detect TTPs and behaviors instead of just IOCs, right? The TTPs, the techniques and tactics. And what happened, Langjak Ha1, this vendor discovered 3,000 endpoints that were already compromised, right? The IOCs changed daily, so they had no idea. But they found through discovering through the TTP perspective, there were only 7 different techniques that were used. And they were able to shut it down, finally, after 6 months. So the conclusion here, and I wanted to share, is ensure you use TTPs, threat intels, in your incident response plans, not just IOCs. Okay, I wanted to share some common IT tools that you should be using in incident response. There's a lot of tools, in the market. Lots of vendors are using them. Different case management system. What a case management system is like, once you start a case, you build the incident response, you go through the workflow. There are specific vendors that have use case management to secure the data, to build a workflow, and all that. So this is one called CYDARM, CYDARM. It's good. It's a good case management system to help you in incident response. Communication platforms. Now, I'm not sure, it depends on accordingly to the company. If you're using Microsoft Teams chat, if you're using Slack, if you're using Whisper, You can use that as your main communications, but you need to agree on that. What is the main communication mode? There's so many different ways to do it. Even offline media, out of band as well. What sort of out of band medium you're going to use? Reporting platforms. Once you have the incident recorded, you have it set up, you go through it, you remediate. Where are you going to put this documentation? Are you going to track on a Google Doc? Are you going to track offline? Are you going to track in a ticketing system like Jira? You have to have these different types of ITSM tools, ServiceNow, stuff like that. You have to get agreed good incident management tools like that. All these have capabilities and modules for that. Now, the other IT tooling that's used in common is logging. Like I said, logging มันสำคัญมาก. Where are you going to put the logs? Where are you pushing it to? Where are you pulling it from? What platforms you need to use. So having a CM tool is very important. Whatever tool you use, open source like SimMonster or more commercial tools like Splunk, Elasticsearch, QRadar, really important places to do logging. And each SIM tool maybe have modules that are specific to forensics analysis. So look into that. Native tools as well, raw logs from hosts, right? SIM tools are fantastic, logging aggregation platforms, but there is certain ways you need to get the logs, right? Get log. You have to do raw logs, and you have to do logs that go into the system to correlate and put out alerts. So you have to have a way to host raw logs, where to put them, offline server, database server, compress, archive, and all that stuff. Also, the monitoring tools like NetFlow that basically monitor your inflow, ingress, egress traffic monitoring. How are you doing that? So NetFlow is a good tool for understanding the baseline of your network traffic. And also your proxies, DHCP, DNS firewalls. There's specific vendors on that. Some more forensics analysis specific tools, I would say EDR. I'm not sure if you use EDR today in your organization. Endpoint detection and response. So for example, CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is a very commercially viable tool that's being used by many organizations today. And that's an endpoint agent that you install on all endpoints to gather telemetry data, gather all the different type of incidences, behaviors, and all that, even gathers maybe some of the memory outputs from incidences. Various tools to integrate and interrogate artifacts of interest, volatile memory. There are tools out there that actually can snapshot RAM memory. And some other useful distributions, like if you're in Red Team, for example, in cybersecurity, you use different types of distributions like Kali Linux to have like pen test tools out of the box. So some of these I like to share, pre-installed forensics tools already. SIFT workstation, we have Flare VM, and we also have Security Onion. Some of these are some of the pre-built distributions, operating systems or VM images that you can install and use right out of the box with some forensics tools. Okay, so one of the next steps on the whole process for IR is remediation. I'd like to focus more on how to do remediation. So to set an example, there are 3 types of remediations. There's effective remediation, those that you do well, those that you do efficiently, those that don't make too much noise, right? There's ineffective remediation. Maybe you're doing remediation, but it's sloppy. You're not doing it, as on purpose, deliberately or accidentally. Maybe you're doing it sloppily. You're not keeping the logs right. You're not documenting enough. This snapshot shows a garbage truck emptying the trash, not doing it very effectively, right? And then those that have no remediation at all, and that's a big problem because you don't know what's happening. You do not know what you do not know, right? So one of the worst things to do is just to not even know what's going on. So you don't know what's happening. That's the worst thing that could do. And that's bad looking for your security team, that you just don't know what's going on in your network, right? So not only the types of remediation, but the different types is, like I said, spelling it out: no remediation, ineffective, and effective. So these just to summarize, if you have no remediation, you don't detect, you have no idea, there's too much noise, or no reaction at all because you ignore it. Some people may be facing an incident I've seen in companies. They said, it's okay. This e-commerce platform client that I had, they went through an incident. They were losing maybe about $100,000 an hour due to incidents, but every hour they're making, 1 million. So they're like, we let's ignore it. Let's just go ahead and get rid of it, and we'll come back. So they maybe they ignore it right away, and they said, "Oh, go away," because their bottom line is not effective. They're making $900,000. They're making $1 million. They're losing 100,000. So that even happens in different scenarios. Ineffective remediation. So you don't have a good understanding what's going on of the investigation. You're only putting band-aids. You're patching it up. You're re-imaging, rebooting machine, but you don't understand. But maybe reboot machine comes back online. It doesn't look like it's infected, but the hacker is still there. He has a backdoor. So that's ineffective. But so ultimately you want to have effective remediation. You don't use too many resources. You don't tell the adversary exactly what's going on. He has no clue that you're actually investigating him. And you also have, high confidence that after you, solve the issue, you prung everything, pokpong everything, you protect, you remediate. You have high confidence it's not going to happen again because it's completely shut off. So you have to have good plans, well-planned remediation activities. Some quick case studies I want to share: ransomware incidences. I want to focus really on ransomware because I know, especially in Muang Thai, lots of ransomware incidences have been occurred. And itself, since 2019, incidences for ransomware itself has increased 62%. Some facts and figures to share to everyone here. In cyber crime, for Southeast Asia alone, it has gone up 600%. Okay, and the prominent threat is ransomware. Ransomware's attack, this type of attack occur globally every 11 seconds. Yeah, resulting in total damages of 20 billion in 2021 alone. And you can see I wanted to share what are the top industries targeted by ransomware in this year alone. So you can see manufacturing, financial services, all critical infrastructures across the board. And you may have a kamtam, why? How come? How come now? It's a combination of, people work from home, the digital transformation shift, the difficulties of securing the environment with remote working, and also things that are evolving. Digital things in the medical field, for example, things are coming online. IoT devices, pacemakers, everything, all different, maybe pump machines, they're coming online. I talked to my parents, my Pishai, Kabin Mall. They're all doctors, my brothers in Mall. I'm only the black sheep, I've been Mall. But I'm in Mall and taking care of sick computers. But the summary is that they ask about, evolving threats from healthcare in cybersecurity. And they see, things evolve. Things are coming online. So anything that's online, it's a hacker's dream. Because there are systems out there that can scan, find the IP address, find the MAC address, and can infect. And the problem with, say, healthcare, for example, right? Things are becoming more efficient, becoming online. You can detect what's going on remotely. Pacemakers, blood pumps, everything's coming online. What is the downside? It's a double-edged sword, right? Security, the problem with security, with all these things of evolving, is that it's an afterthought. It's not baked in. People want to go to market, Kai device family, Make it efficient. Awesome. People would love it. You know, you don't have to be here. You just log in. You can look at remotely how it's good and bad. But the bad side is a hacker. It's a playground for them. They can hack into it. These systems, they can shut it down. So imagine hacking to a pacemaker, shutting it down. Even car manufacturing, right? You're driving, took one knee, you're not driving a car anymore. My cup lo lao. Cup. Don't need to con cup and computer, right? You're driving a computer on wheels. Everything's digitized, everything's online. There has been demonstrations, real life incidences too, from like DEF CON, that hackers have hacked cars remotely. They're on the highway, right? They're on a freeway. They're on a bridge, right? Watching the freeway cars, and they can actually hack like a Tesla or something electronic car to apply the brakes. So imagine that. So going back to that, so why cybercrime has risen a lot, especially ransomware, because it's easy. People want to pay. People panic. You know, you encrypt an entire hospital system. That goes down. People are on life support system. What do? You panic, you pay, right? So that's why. That's the reason why there's such a huge increase. So that's why it's very important now to react and recover more efficiently using incident response. So this to share another facts and figures. In September of BNE, there's a web hosting service in Malaysia. They were targeted of a ransomware. They demanded 9,000 lian in crypto. And also in Thailand, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Philippines alone, in this year alone, there was a international insurance company that was hit by ransomware. And they were asking for 20 ล้าน lian. So imagine that. Something to share. I know we're getting towards the end, so I'm wrapping it up. Something to share. You can snapshot this or I'll share with you after. Here's something from the UN website. What does a ransom attack look like? Something to share how it happens and in the flow, what it goes on. So step one, you know, they send a phishing email. Most ransomware attacks come in from a phishing email. User receives, clicks on it, malware unpacks, the attacker gains access, they encrypt the data. This malware phones home, contacts the hacker and says, we've encrypted this data. You can contact the victim. The victim then gets contacted by the hacker, tells them, give us 20 million, or we get rid of the data, we release the data, and all that depending on it. And the files are encrypted. If the victim eventually pays, the files are then, the hacker basically gives them the private key to decrypt. But it's not always a guarantee. It's not 100%. They may just release it anyways or ask for more money. So do you pay? Do you don't pay? It's really up to the organization's risk, their risk appetite. What is encrypted? What's infected, right? Then you have to make that decision within your playbook. So wrapping it up, how would your organization respond to something like this, to a ransomware attack? Ask yourself, ask your company, you know, has your incident response plan been initiated? Do you have a plan in place? Do you have relevant playbooks? Who is involved? What external entities? What type of communications protocols do you have? What type of data do you need to acquire? What are the Ttps or indicators from the attacker? Do you need to deploy additional tools? Are your tools good enough? How long will this take to remediate? What are the remediation tactics that you need to do? And any other actions. So think about this as an organization today after sharing all these frameworks, best practices, things to avoid. Think about that. And lastly, some more resources I'd love to share with you. I've dug this up. I've used some as well. Here's a non-exhaustive list of some of the very useful guides and sites. So the UK National Cybersecurity Consortium basically has a site that has here this first link, shows this bottom graph on some of the flow charts, some of the playbooks that they can share readily out of the box. So you don't have to create it completely new. right? Sysnet IR plan template. You can sign up here in the second link. Just go to that site, sign up with your email address, and you can build a playbook using their tools. The last one is an incident response consortium playbook, incidentresponse.com/playbooks. And this is the snapshot I have on the top, on the right side on the top. They actually have huge galleries of playbooks depending upon the incident type. And you can just go to this site, click on it, use it. And you can click and drill down to see what the playbook looks like. You can copy it and use it. You can sign up for it. I'm not sure if there's a paid, commercial, or free you can use for this, but please use this or look into it and consider it. I don't want your organization to start from scratch, start from zero. So here are some good guidances on where to kickstart your incident response plan. Okay. So quick wrap up. What did we talk about today? We talked about what is incident response? What is the outcome we face? Why do we do it? What are the common mistakes to avoid? Some of the methodologies and approaches I've shown you, the protocols, the TTPs and IOCs that I've shared, maybe a case study on the IOC versus TTP and why TTP is very effective. Some of the supporting frameworks from Nist, some of the common toolings during forensics, frameworks, best practices, some of the good, effective, and ineffective, or even no remediation, some of the types, and also ransomware case studies affecting especially Southeast Asia and Thailand. So with that, that's really the end of my presentation. I'd like to show you one more. I'd like to gather some things across the net and some of my own experiences I love to share. Here's a sample incident response workflow. Now, this is something that's really great. I like itเพราะว่าit shows you the different stages of detection, investigation, containment, and the review and improvements, and the different swim lanes. So I like to use swim lanes all the time, swim lane, because each one shows you the different groups involved. And it could be the end user, it could be the help desk, IT security, service owner, management teams, everyone, and what you need to do in each flow chart, in each step to make your incident response plans effective. Okay, ขอบคุณมากครับ ขอบคุณมากครับทุกคนที่ฟังผมวันนี้ Here's my contact details, my name, my email address. You can catch me on Signal or WhatsApp on my เบอร์โทรศัพท์ของ Singapore, my US phone number, even my เบอร์โทรศัพท์ไทย and my LinkedIn address. So again, ขอบคุณมากครับทุกคน
Thank you very much, Kun Gawin. Okay, so right now we are open for questions and answers. It's a Q&A sessions right now. Okay, so actually like there are a couple of questions in the chat box to ask the computer doctor. Just like you said, you're the computer doctor. Okay, and I will have to ask this question first because it's related to the previous slides that you just showed. Okay. It's from Mr. Kamon,นะคะ. He asked this question. So if the organization doesn't have an incident response team, but right now it's using the existing team as a response team, right, which has other tasks to take care of as well. Right. So which way works better, to use the existing team or to maybe, like find another team, set up another team to help?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I know lots of organizations depend on the size, right? Big or small. Sometimes you're in a บริษัทเล็กมาก right? You're like 20-30 คน and you wear many hats. ทำทุกอย่าง, right? Sometimes I've even done that before. But look at it this way, right? If your company is too small to hire a dedicated team, if it's too expensive, and you're finding that incident response in your current team is effective, you're doing things okay, you're reacting or planning appropriately on incidences, continue using them. That's fine. But make sure that they have enough time if something happens. If you find that an incident happens every week and their time is always about reacting to incidents and their main job can't be done, then you maybe have to consider จ้างคนใหม่ Or
Okay.
another alternative is to find an outside vendor to help get like a retainer. Like there's a lot of bodhisattva, like simply put, example, IBM. IBM has incident response retainer service. You can pay them one amount. They can use the number of hours, drill down for a year. Incident occurs if something major, they call it they can help. So my suggestion, yeah, depending upon the maturity, if you see if they're effective, if not, then build your own team, dedicated team. If not, then hire a third party.
Okay, thank you so much. And there's a follow-up question to that as well. So, like, as far as we know, like the boss, the CEO, or the executives are the one who make the call, right? Who will be in charge of this? So, the same from Mr. Kamon as well. So, how to make executives see the importance of the incident response work?
Yes. So, Kun Gamon, the most important things, as a CEO or the board of directors, right? I would say when I was a CEO is the bottom line, profitability, right? Revenue profitability doesn't get impacted. And if they realize, if you report to them an incident and say like, look, this takes time, it took too long, we lost a lot of revenue. But in the next incident, if something happens again, and they show you show them in a report in the metrics that we've improved, our remediation time went from 5 days to 3 days. And they like that. They'll invest more. They give you more confidence in your team. So the biggest metric to measure for them is to understand how to close the gap of that incident, of detecting, responding, and mitigating.
Okay. Thank you so much for the answer. Okay, Kun Kamon also typed in the chat and he says thank you, Crab, as well. Okay, so I think there is one more question. It was typed in the chat earlier by Kun Chainarong as well. What is the most important step for a response? I think he probably meant the incident response. Most important step for a response.
Oh, within the response function?
Right.
Remediation?
ค่ะคุณชัยนรงค์คะ if you are here maybe you can ask more like to give คุณกวิน how can I say like further information or addition
ครับคุณ
ค่ะคุณชัยนรงค์อยู่ไหมคะ
ฮัลโหลครับ
yeah โอเคค่ะสามารถถามเพิ่มเติมได้เลยค่ะ
เปิดเสียงหน่อยก็ได้ยินช่องทางเพิ่มเติมไหมไม่มีครับขอบคุณมากสำหรับคำถาม
โอเคสำหรับคำถาม
Thank
ที่
you
คุณ
for
ชัย
your answers I really appreciate
โอเคค่ะโอเคแต่ค่ะมีคำถามเพิ่มเติมไหมคะเห็นว่าเมื่อตอน 11 โมงหน่อยๆพิมพ์มาถามเกี่ยวกับthe most important step for a response
I wouldผมคิดว่า like every step is important in responding. You have to take into account every single thing because it's really important on doing effective response to every situation, right? How do you respond to a fire, right? And how do you respond in the right way? Like some people would say, if it's a small fire, do you put water on it? Maybe. If it's a bigger fire, do you still put water on it? Maybe not. You put sand. So the different response mechanisms depend upon your playbook. So each step has a very important impact upon the next. So take every single step in response function very, very heavily.
Thank you so much for the wrap up. Okay. Will there be any more answers? Oh, sorry. Will there be any more questions from the participants?
Yep.
Okay,ค่ะ. All right. It seems that there would be no more questions for now ค่ะ โอเคค่ะ เดี๋ยวขออนุญาตส่งต่อให้พิธีกรอีกท่านหนึ่งค่ะ
ค่ะน้องแซงนะคะน้องแซงขออนุญาตแชร์หน้าจอนะคะค่ะขอบคุณทุกท่านที่ได้เข้าร่วมการอบรมในวันนี้ค่ะ ซึ่งทุกท่านได้ความรู้เกี่ยวกับแผนการรับมือ Incident Response Plan เพื่อนำความรู้ไปประกอบใช้ในการฝึกทางไซเบอร์ที่กำหนดจัดขึ้นระหว่างวันที่ 22 ถึง 24 ธันวาคมนี้ค่ะ สุดท้ายนี้ขอความร่วมมือกรุณาทุกท่านนะคะ ช่วยทำแบบประเมินความพึงพอใจในการรับฟังการอบรมในวันนี้ค่ะ ได้จากลิงก์ที่อยู่ในแชทบ็อกซ์หรือ QR Code ที่ปรากฏเพื่อเป็นประโยชน์ต่อการปรับปรุงและพัฒนาในการต่อไปค่ะ ขอบคุณทุกท่านนะคะ รวมถึงขอบคุณท่านวิทยากรด้วยค่ะ ขอขอบคุณผู้เข้าร่วมการอบรมทุกท่านนะคะ วันนี้การอบรมได้จบลงเรียบร้อยค่ะ ขอบคุณค่ะ